At a time when Wetherspoon's boss is bemoaning the impact of COVID on pubs and the habits that have tempted people away from the pub and to buy things from the supermarket, I think also, he also explains that tax is greater for people drinking in pubs. But I think what he fails to do is recognise that pubs in the up until the beginning of the 20th century played a much more vibrant and a much more cohesive role in British society. They were the places where a lot of business was done, where people were paid, labourers were paid, where deals were signed. It was the place. It was a workplace. And it no longer is. It was a place where people would eat. Now it is very much a drinking place or a pseudo restaurant, and very little else seems to go on in pubs. And because we have broken that tradition, now pubs are competing directly with supermarkets. There were ways, I suppose, to revive the older tradition of the pub being the centre of the local community, but I think once that's gone, and once people lost that that focus, it's very difficult to repair that. Spartacus for Life 1508 was responding to my cries to work together to repair society, and she said, put forward 5 points. 1, kids really need to stop being allowed to get away with small-scale criminality that leads to more serious crime. Yeah, okay. It's all about education. 2, politics and social reform need to be taken out of the educational system. I'm inclined to disagree with that. I think politics is the educational system. Politics is simply the way that we learn how to discuss things with other people, to discuss things that we don't agree with other people who are not our family. That's the job of politics, how to be civilized. And it's different. When we lived in a village, we knew everybody. We were related to everybody. We didn't really have anything new to add. And when we moved to the cities, to the polis, a Greek word for city, from which we get the word politics, from which we get the word polite, we needed a different code for interacting. 3, police to work more closely with communities to target criminality. Well, again, I would say there isn't such a thing as a community. There are individuals that make up a community, individuals that make up a society. With that, I am there with Mrs. Thatcher in her 1980s Woman's Own feature. Number 4, often misquoted. Number 4, God forgive me, but bring back borstalls. There was a lot less youth criminality when they were in place because kids were scared of going in them. I don't think our crime wave is necessarily just because of children. And if we look across Parliament, we see a crime wave led by our political elite. We're not going to put those in borstalls, are we? Number 5, persistent antisocial families to stop receiving state benefits and housing. Well, they are persistent antisocial because presumably they are struggling and they are desperate and they don't see any moral restraint. What we need to do is to teach people personal responsibility. And there's no point in imposing all these things from without. It has to come from within. And that means better education at heart, at the start. Ask anyone from rough housing estates who abide by the law. Pussyfooting around these types only leads to more crime, and it is generational. It is always the same families causing it. Well, yeah, you know, so Boris, bah! Criminal behaviour in 10 Downing Street. Always the same families? I don't know whether Boris's father would agree with that, but there we are. Who knows? Who knows? And those people Boris is putting into the House of Lords, are they all part of the same family? No, I agree that education is a key to reforming society, but not the education system that we've got. We need to rethink our education system. It needs to be student-led, and it needs to be child-led, and it needs the teachers need to respond to to a children's needs, we need to recognise, and we need to recognise very firmly, the subjects we teach are simply the doors into the educational process. Once we're in that educational process, we are there. But we need to enter that educational house through a door. Doesn't matter which door it is, English, history, French, geography, religious studies, it doesn't really matter. They're all the same. In the end, those doors are not important. What's important is the methodology that we learn while we are in that house of education. And we've got confused. We have been bewitched by teachers whose only job is religious education, history, English, art, or whatever. We've been bewitched into thinking that those subjects are important. What is important are the skills that we learn while we are looking at those subjects. We cannot learn those skills without something to target and to practice on, whether that is geography, history, French, Latin, Greek. It doesn't matter. And that's why learning subjects like Latin and Greek are perfectly valuable. We've got too much obsession with the utilitarian. In the end, I am never going to learn. I'm never going to use the history that I learnt at school. If I need history, I have to read it up. I have to check out my facts in my from the books I've got or from the internet. The history that I learnt anyway is out of date. A lot of it is wrong. But the techniques I learnt from some incredibly skilled teachers are never out of date. Never. And the techniques that I learned about how to write an essay, I learned that very late. Never out of date. The techniques I learned for research, never out of date. The techniques I learned for analysing language, it doesn't matter which language it is, never out of date. The basic techniques I learned for mathematics, never out of date. Other people do it better than I do, but never out of date. And the way of analysing a story, analysing what somebody tells me, you know, I can use that in the cinema, I can use that when I'm looking at history, I can use that when I'm listening to somebody telling me a porky. And again, it's always the same. Consistency, focus. And we are not teaching these skills. We are teaching children to parrot facts. And that isn't useful. We might as well be putting them in a school in Russia. I've taught in schools in Russia. I've taught teachers how to teach in schools in Russia. And I was there trying to change the education system there. And I thought there was an opportunity to change the education system globally. I was working with a man who's now working in Israel. Sadly, he and I both left Russia. But you know, who knows? Maybe somebody will listen to us eventually. But it's the techniques we need to practice. And those techniques are civilizing. And that's what we've lost. We have lost civilizing techniques partly because of the stupidity of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy? Bureaucracy comes from two words, bureau and kratos. Kratos is a Greek word meaning rule. Ruled by the bureau. A bureau is just another word for a desk. Ruled by a piece of wood. We might as well be ruled by a plank.